Welcome to the Kennedy Report. I'm Kennedy Hall. Joe Boca's back, and he's here to help, and we're happy about it. Okay, bombshell. Well, I don't know if it's a bombshell, but you got to say that to make people think that it is. So as far as you're concerned, viewer, this is a bombshell, and you got to stay around to learn what you need to know. Cardinal Mueller, if I could speak German, which I don't, he had an interview with a Spanish Catholic periodical. I believe it's called Info Vaticana or something like that. Long, extensive interview. My colleague at LifeSite, shout out Pro-Life Warrior, LifeSite News Company swag right there. She wrote a great blog on it. We'll share that in a bit and go through that. And I was struck by it because he said something about the limited power of the Pope and how bishops are supposed to act and what their authority is all about. He cited the Second Vatican Council to do so. And I thought, this actually justifies the Society of St. Pius X's position historically, but there's more to it because it's more complicated, as we'll see with Joe Boca. We're going to get to that, but first, like this video, subscribe to this channel, click the links in the descriptions, notification bell, etc., etc., etc. We've seen a billion YouTube videos, and you know exactly what you're supposed to do. Thumbs up. All right. How you doing, Joe?
Good, Kennedy. How are you? It's a lovely day here in the Northeast.
It is. We Fahrenheit. I know 75 Fahrenheit's around 25 Celsius. So we're at probably 17 or 18 Celsius right now.
We're
65, 60.
Mid to low 60s.
Yeah.
Fall is one of the great gifts that New York can give you. It's, for all its flaws, we have lovely seasons.
You get pumpkin spice latte season, right? That's what
Of course we do.
Especially with soy milk, right?
Oh, of course. Soy, oat milk, you name it.
Actually, you know what? I don't mind the oat milk thing.
Call Kennedy. Don't say it publicly.
No, my wife got she got some steamed oat milk thing and it tasted like apple pie. And I was like, wow, that's delicious. I mean, pretending it's milk is insane, but it's some beverage and you make something tasty, whatever. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. I like soy sauce on my rice, but
on your Chinese food, yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we'll share this article here. What were your first impressions when you're reading through it?
Well, you and I were talking about this before. I jotted some notes down on it. It was interesting, and I wrote something about Cardinal Mueller on the Twitter, where I'm most prolific. He says a lot of great things.
He does.
This Cardinal Mueller. He very strong on the culture, very strong on the alphabet people and globalism and things like this. The problem, but the first thing I did was immediately point out an issue. So he's citing Lumen Gentium contra the Jesuit Cardinal Ghirlanda, right?
Yeah.
So he's citing the Lumen Gentium's concept of the episcopate. I was just scanning the conciliar text before about 10 minutes ago. It's included in the article anyway. Long and short of it, though, is as good as Mueller can be, he ends up running into a problem where he's saying, well, okay, he's rejecting the I guess what people have started calling hyper-papalism.
Papal maximalism.
Yeah, and I know there's this whole papal minimalist thing. My own opinion is we need some gloss on Vatican I if we could get it. Yes. by some sane people.
Well, but, and in fairness, sorry to interrupt, but Vatican I never really finished because the war in Italy started, the revolution.
Right.
So that's not a rad trad opinion. Vatican II was supposed to be a culmination of it, but never really addressed the same issues.
No, it was completely historically separate. Basically, they kind of arbitrarily close Vatican I and then go with this odd Vatican II thing. Yeah. So what Mueller does is he cites Lumen Gentium, I think 25, if I'm not mistaken. 27. Okay, yeah. That's probably why I couldn't find what I wanted to find. But so basically, this mistaken idea of the episcopacy, which Vatican II can actually invents out of whole cloth, from what I gather. So it's the long and short of it is if we understand jurisdiction as coming from the jurisdiction, faculties to hear confessions, witness marriages, things like this, to say mass, not say mass validly, but say mass licitly. The traditional idea of that is that jurisdiction and faculties comes from the Pope down to the local ordinary, down to the priest. Whereas Lumen Gentium says, which, yeah, I don't, I mean, maybe somebody could find where this is in any kind of magisterial tradition, but Lumen Gentium claims that.
Well, it says it differently. Let's get to what Mueller said, though, so we can use that as a
Yeah,
springboard. So here's the article. It's I'll put us both to the side there. Good. I've made it big so people can read with us if they'd like. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the gist of is that this idea that the Pope has unlimited, I highlighted there, unlimited power over the church, is this idea being pushed by Cardinal Gianfranco Ghirlanda. He's a Jesuit, shocker. There are a couple good Jesuits left. Shout out to Father McTagg. And he's a big part of Pope Francis's entourage. And he presents this idea, the papacy as an unlimited power of divine right over the whole church, as if the Pope were a deus in terris, a god on earth. And this is apparently cited. Let's find it in here. Do a little Control F. Earth. I don't know. I guess it's not cited in here, but they cite to this one. Oh, it's just going over it in general. Anyway, point is, that's not Catholic. That's Protestant. That's divine right of kings applied to the Pope. It's not Catholic. Anyway, continuing. I guess he's German. He's a very Italian name. Anyway, they continue. Oh no, sorry. Cardinal Mueller is a German cardinal. Never mind. Continuing. He goes to the point where this is where Cardinal Mueller actually criticizes what this cardinal has said, and I'm going to talk about why, if this were the case, it would justify the SSPX, and then even if it's not the case, the fact that the SSPX is standing up against what is a novelty, that actually justifies the SSPX because for other reasons. Okay, so says the former head of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith corrected Ghirlanda's view in the new interview with the Spanish language website Info Vaticana. I was right, insisting that in the sacrament of ordination, Christ confers on the bishop or priest the authority to preach, sanctify, and govern, including, to administer justice. Thus, the Pope does not confer jurisdiction on a bishop. Ooh, that's a big statement. But only assigns the concrete diocese to a bishop, in which, however, he is not the representative of the papacy, but of Jesus Christ. That's a really striking statement. We're going to go see what he's saying there from Lumen Gentium. I'm going to bring that up here, and I'll read through it here. And it says, bishops as vicars and ambassadors of Christ govern the particular churches entrusted to them by their counsel, exhortations, example, and even by their authority and sacred power, which indeed they use only for the edification of their flock in truth and holiness. Remembering that he who is greater should become as the lesser, and he who is the chief become as the servant. Fair enough. This power which they personally exercise in Christ's name is proper, ordinary, and immediate. Keyword immediate. Boom. You got it if you're a bishop. Although its exercise is ultimately regulated by the supreme authority of the church and can be circumscribed by certain limits for the advantage of the church or of the faithful. In virtue of this power, bishops have the sacred right and duty before the Lord to make laws for their subjects, to pass judgment on them, and to moderate everything pertaining to the ordering of worship and of the apostolate. The pastoral office or the habitual and daily care of their sheep is entrusted to them completely, nor are they to be regarded as vicars of the Roman pontiffs, for they exercise an authority that is proper to them, and are quite correctly called prelates, heads of the people whom they govern. That's striking. Their power, therefore, is not destroyed by the supreme and universal power, but on the contrary, it is affirmed, strengthened, and vindicated by it, since the Holy Spirit unfailingly preserves the form of government established by Christ and his holy church. Okay, so that alone, this is where you find your novelty with former teaching. However, the way that Cardinal Mueller understands it, remember, Cardinal Mueller was, he was the head of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, if I'm not mistaken. So that means he's basically in charge of doctrine on earth under Ratzinger, who was, they call him Benedict's, Rottweiler, right? Or JP2's Rottweiler. He was in charge of doctrine then. So he's got some credentials. And his opinion is basically that the Pope could never have this unlimited ultimate authority in the way that it's described, because bishops have, as Lumen Gentium says, we go back to that, it says immediate power, ordinary and immediate power over their flock, and the supreme authority basically affirms it. I remember, where did it say affirm? It said it somewhere in there. But anyway, so the understanding of Mueller, as far as I can tell, and you can comment on this if your thoughts too, is basically Vatican II says that bishops have this immediate jurisdictional power once they become a bishop. So therefore, the Pope, so as Mueller says, the Pope, Christ confers on the bishop, which I guess is true in a sense. I get that because it's all from Christ apostolically. I get that. But Christ confers it. The Pope does not confer jurisdiction on a bishop, but only assigns the concrete bishop to a diocese. So basically what he's saying is bishops, by virtue of being a bishop, have jurisdiction. This is completely different than how it is understood today. So this brings up a lot of things here. He's the former head of the CDF. He's interpreting Vatican II. And if you actually read it, it's like, that's a valid interpretation of Vatican II. If you were to follow Vatican II. But that means that jurisdiction, you just have it because you're a bishop. Which if you apply that to the SSPX, then there would have never been a problem with anything. Because they have really, think about it. It's like, if that's what it teaches, then you just have you're a mini pope in a sense. Like, you have jurisdiction because you're a bishop. So Marcel Lefebvre did not need the authority of the Pope. And then, speaking hypothetically here, people did not need it to do the bishop consecrations. The priests didn't need to go to Rome to get their jurisdiction for anything else. None of that is needed. It's all just some sort of superficial show of unity and icing on the cake. It made me think, though, two things. One, I think that's one of the main reasons why it's been so confusing on how the church is to deal with the SSPX. Because in the old ways, excuse me, jurisdiction is needed in a normal sense, but they're trying to say everyone's supposed to follow the Second Vatican Council, which according to Mueller means a bishop just has jurisdiction, which makes the whole thing difficult. But also, this actually proves the integrity of the SSPX, because they could just appeal to this. I mean, if they wanted to, they sincerely could. If they wanted to be opportunists, they could say, Second Vatican Council says that our bishops, by virtue of their ordination, have immediate jurisdiction. So we don't need to deal with you, Rome. Get with the program, get with the council, get with the surprises of the Holy Spirit from Second Vatican Council. But they don't. They go and they operate in the traditional fashion. Anyway, I think it is illuminating how Mueller sees it this way, for reasons that I just explained. So what say you?
There's a good many ironies to this, because it's like, well, okay. So there's a lot of debate in Catholic circles. Well, we know this in Catholic circles writ large regarding the authority of the Pope and what he does and doesn't have the authority to do, especially in relation to liturgy, erroneous councils, things like this. How far does his power extend? Is the Catholic Church ultramontane? Is the correct view on it papal minimalism? Not settled necessarily, but there's this Michael Davies would point it out a lot. There's kind of this obedience double standard.
Yes.
Where it's like, well, okay, the church, the Petrine See will, when it's convenient in cases of like Latin Mass suppression and things like this, and saying that this SSPX doesn't have faculties for marriage and confessions, which has since been, but it's been that way. It was considered to be that way for a long time.
That's right.
So the church would defer to its somewhat traditional teachings on the papacy in order to put a boot on the neck of traditionalists. But then when regarding their but the irony is that the ultimate program was to diminish the power of the Petrine office in
that's right,
in favor of collegiality, because and a bad kind of an unfortunate kind of subsidiarity. So subsidiarity, but what's funny is subsidiarity is what you call it, holy localism, right? It's power delegated to the most local sources. Subsidiarity is the thing that's supposed to be the principle of secular politics or governance and things like that, but is not really supposed to apply to church governance, which is really supposed to be completely top down. But these people being the way they are, if they didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards. So they go and wield the church's authority against the SSPX and whomever else, but then contra-wise will defer to things like collegiality.
That's right.
When you see this kind of thing manifesting, especially with like the German bishops, which they just did with the situation with trying to ratify homosexual marriage. So
yeah, you're exactly right. And I'll bring this up here. You mentioned collegiality. This is there's a little booklet called Time Bombs, the Second Vatican Council. And it goes over the things that Lefebvre was concerned about. And one of them is, I'll highlight it here, Decree on the Church, Lumen Gentium. That's the document we're going for. That's the document right there. And collegiality was one of the big issues. And the reason for that was this is what we would have. We would eventually have basically national bishops' conferences that act as national churches where they have different doctrine with different borders. And so on the one hand, as I said, the SSPX could be using Lumen Gentium to justify their own position. They could be using it, I think. Maybe some will say I'm wrong, but I believe if this whole idea that Mueller is saying, and he understands Vatican II more than I do, and he's saying that you could use it to justify, you actually get your jurisdiction from Christ, which is true in a sense, though. And here's why this is so difficult, because you don't need confession, you don't need jurisdiction to hear someone's confession when there's a need for it. Some sort of, it says this in canon law, danger of, not just danger of death, but for any just cause. It says in canon 1335, for any just cause, you can go to even a suspended priest. You can go to an Orthodox priest if that's what's necessary. If you're in a mortal sin and you don't want to go to hell, it's a just cause. It's pretty simple. Let's just say in some alternate universe, they shipped, Canada became an Orthodox Catholic country or an Orthodox Christian country and shipped out all the Catholic priests by law or something, and all that was left with the Orthodox. We could do the whole remnant thing in house church and whatever, but at the same time, if that was going to get my head cut off, canon law says I can go to an Orthodox church for a necessary reason. I'm not saying to do this. I'm just saying this is what's understood, because if they're valid priests, therefore they have sacraments, and in a state of grave necessity, therefore you go to them. So in a sense, bishops do have a jurisdiction immediately, but the normal understanding of that historically has been that the Pope is the supreme jurist of the church, and then there's a delegation. We see this, for example, if we can contrast what happens in missionary territory versus when it becomes an actual established diocesan territory. So when Lefebvre went to Africa and there was no diocese, he was a bishop of sort of an expansive area. And there, the way the jurisdiction would work would probably be a little bit different, to be honest, just out of necessity. And then eventually it was established with other dioceses under his overall care. And then those bishops would have had, authority proper to them. If you think about when the Spanish came over to Mexico, normally speaking, priests are supposed to have the permission of the local bishop to do confirmations if they're going to do it instead of the bishop. They can. It's not the custom, but it can happen. I would imagine that many people were probably confirmed by priests in missionary Mexico. That would have made sense because there were no bishops in all the places to do it. And, they come into the church as adults. So you can follow the logic out there. Historically, you're supposed to have permission for confessing or for recognizing certain sins as absolved. Historically, that was the case with abortion. It's not anymore. You're supposed to, normally speaking, have the permission of the local bishop for exorcisms, but in some cases you don't have to. And in fact, it's just a matter of authority. So even the head of your order could give that to you. The reason I'm saying all these things is because this is just like scripture says, if you have any authority, it comes from above. So if someone's above you, this is what Christ says in front of Pilate, for example, there is this understanding of authority. So the Second Vatican Council is correct in an abstract sense. Yes, the authority comes from Christ, but the way it's always been done in church is that there's just like with the angels, just like with the hierarchy of the saints, Mary, Joseph, etc. There is a applicable and practical hierarchy that works for the governance of the church. So the society has fought for that, even against their own interests, one might say. Whereas Mueller is basically saying the opposite.
Yeah, what Vatican II doesn't say is it doesn't acknowledge. So it doesn't acknowledge the idea that basically what the bishops have is the potentiality for jurisdiction, but not
that's right.
Not immediate, laying of hands, and then all of a sudden there. I mean, it's really an odd thing that Vatican II says, because it's like, well, okay, so a bishop is consecrated and then he has jurisdiction just like that, but like where? Like jurisdiction necessarily needs a territory, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because that would, if you think of it in a secular way, but my local police department has jurisdiction over the locale, but it would be an odd thing that like a given police officer X would have immediate jurisdiction over some town in Australia or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just strange.
Or even the next town.
Right. Which it obviously doesn't. So it's silly, but it's how Vatican II really operates. And
but they do have a sacramental power. So every priest and bishop, in a sense, does have a jurisdiction over every individual soul that's under their care. So I think that's, I think a lot of the problems with Vatican II has been the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, as they say. And, again, let's take the lockdown, obviously, there you couldn't get sacraments in many places. So a lot of people it's weird. They were totally fine with the SSPX during lockdown because they're like, well, jurisdiction doesn't matter because they're not open. But then as soon as the diocese is open, they're like, well, they don't have jurisdiction anymore, because there's no necessity. Right. But as silly as that is, we recognize this understanding of, if we apply it to the natural realm, I would say it's sort of like a natural rights. So for example, in most legal codes, you do find something called citizen's arrest. So if we live in the same town, I do have jurisdiction over you if you're committing a crime, in the sense that I can actually kind of apprehend you and detain you I can do even Canadian law where, we're barely allowed to use weapons in home defense. But technically speaking, if you're committing a crime, I could actually detain you. And I wouldn't be, and even if I had to use force, I wouldn't be in trouble for doing so under the normal circumstances. But then I'm supposed to call the police and go to the actual jurisdictional authority. So this does exist in both the ecclesial and the natural realm. But again, it completely muddies the conversation, because historically the emphasis, and this is just the same thing that the Second Vatican Council has done with marriage. So two ends of marriage. Primary procreation historically has always been number one. Let's say that's number one. 1A, we don't have to call it second, but just a little bit after the first, is the unitive aspect. The reason why I say it's a little bit after is because, of course, it always has to be consensual. So you can't say that all that is necessary is the procreative, because you could bring that to a pretty dark place. That's the same way we treat cows, for example, and that's not a good thing to do in a marriage. But the primary importance of marriage is the procreation and raising of children. The supporting secondary, although very close aspect, is the unitive reality for the spouses. Well, the Second Vatican Council statements on marriage flip that. So it's not wrong that unity is primary in the sense that it's attached to the primary thing, but it's not the primary thing. And this has caused major confusion there, which has led to obviously a completely muddy conversation on marriage. And it's obviously, my children are screaming. And it's clearly, reaches its logical conclusion. If that's the case, then really the point of marriage is love. And if there's no love, then there's really no marriage, because that's what the Second Vatican Council tells me. This seems like the same idea.
Yeah, that's right. Lots of putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. Right. What you have, and so it's all basically to serve this end of the collegial end. I was just bouncing through. I have, it's pretty useful, the essential text of Vatican II. So I was highlighting some passages. So, and one is, in a similar way, the Roman Pontiff, Peter's successors, and the bishops, successors of the apostles, are joined together. So there's this underlying theme, and you see it like in Malachi Martin a lot. You see it in when you're reading Father Elijah. Father Elijah Windswept House is more akin to actual reality. This idea of the Pope being almost like mostly John Paul II, this like a prisoner in the Vatican type character who's just like beholden to his cardinals and the archbishops throughout the world, and is essentially powerless but of goodwill. I get that. I don't, I question I question what John Paul II was thinking, but that was basically the pet project of the reformers.
Well,
you pick it up.
So let's another thing that Mueller said, though, and this is why Mueller's interview is kind of fascinating, because he says, and I'll share this here actually. Let's get this back on the screen. He says such a position contradicts this idea that the Pope is an autocrat, right? Contradicts the entire Catholic tradition. That is true, though, actually. Again, it's all about emphasis. There's no measured, balanced, golden mean emphasis amongst the Second Vatican Council era, because we do find examples in the past. For example, Bishop Grosset in England. This is a famous one. He was told by the Pope to make, it was a family member basically, into a bishop in England. And it was a clear sign of nepotism, and he declined. And when the Pope wanted to reprimand him for it, his cardinals around him said, you can't, he's too holy, he's too well loved, you can't do that. So it showed that the Pope can't act in a merely political way that would go against, which again, Lumen Gentium does say this, though, for being fair. It does say it, they have this power which they use only for the edification of their flock in truth and holiness, which I agree. That is the point of the church. It's the point of the church is, right, truth, salvation. Of course, that's the point. So, this is why Vatican II is so difficult, is because it contains all these statements that are taken in and of themselves, true statements, but put together makes a very confusing mess. And Mueller says this contradicts the entire Catholic tradition, and especially the Second Vatican Council, that the bishops and priests have only the authority to perform sacramental acts, while the Pope is in sole possession of all jurisdiction, which he can delegate at will to clerics or laymen. Again, this idea that has sole possession of all jurisdiction, kind of true, kind of not true. Again, because yes, normally speaking, the Pope can send a letter saying, I'm sending you to Topeka, Kansas, no matter what. Even if you're not in America. On the other hand, the Second Vatican Council is correct, and it says that the point of the episcopacy is to build up the flock. And we see this with historical examples such as Bishop Grosset, who was told to do something by the Pope. And he's a hero in England, by the way. There's like universities named after him. It's not like he's some obscure guy who was called a schismatic. He was a hero. And he said, no, Holy Father, I can't, because what you're asking me to do will harm the flock. That's against my mandate as a bishop, essentially. Which has been used to justify Marcel Lefebvre, because clearly. So, the SSPX, again, just like they did with the Latin Mass, which was liberated by Summorum Pontificum, the reason they're taking this stance is not for themselves, but for the church. It would be easy for them to say, you know what? We're just going to follow Second Vatican Council. If you don't want us to follow that, then you're a schismatic who doesn't follow the Holy Ghost surprises after the council. But they say we can't, because as much as this would be beneficial to us, this would actually harm a true understanding, which will continue to harm things like, the collegiality that we see.
It's eminently simple, right? So the project of the church, the whole point of the church is to continue the mission of Christ on earth after he ascended into heaven, which is to get souls to heaven with him. Canon law says it. The supreme law of the church is the salvation of souls.
That's right.
Bottom line is anything that's a hindrance to that has no weight. So at all. So because it's teleology, end, purpose, why something is. Like, so what is the Petrine authority even for?
Yeah.
It's to assist in the salvation of souls. So insofar as something runs up against that, it's philosophically incoherent. It makes no sense. So once authority becomes arbitrary, that is when we can, dispense with it. Which Thomas Aquinas makes that very clear himself. And says, an unjust law is no law at all that good, all that good stuff. There's been I thought of a funny story while you're going through that, because it's like kind of like this idea that the Vatican I and the pre-Vatican II church was like Rome has spoke, and we're just like, we need always to be under the thumb of the Pope, the man in Rome, which is there's of course there's truth to that. But I was thinking of a funny story of Archbishop John Hughes, who was the Archbishop of New York.
Dagger John.
I love Dagger John. And so he was very very political. He's not a canonized saint. I do hope he's in heaven. And I'm sure there's a good chance he is. But he was very political. He was involved with a lot of New York City politics and a lot of American politics, and regarding, and so he was involved in some things regarding the Civil War, if I'm
1860s.
Yeah. So he was asked to go basically on behalf of the United States as France, and he knew he would have had to have asked for the Pope's permission. And so what he does is he intentionally writes a letter. He writes a letter to the Pope, knowing that it won't get there on time.
Yeah.
And and heads to France anyway, saying, "Well, I wrote you the letter."
Yeah.
So there's been people like bishops and things like this doing things, and look, it's not the same thing as consecrating a bishop. It's not the same weight, but we've not all bishops and priests have not always just been these automaton drones.
No.
Exercising the express will of the man in Rome. You know what I mean?
Well, you and I have talked about this a bunch. These what should we call them? These papal maximalists. These guys who, basically act as if if Pope Francis was out there hitting people over the head with a cane, we'd have to somehow interpret that in a charitable manner. It's like, no, we don't. He's beating people up with canes. I mean, they used to put certain blasphemers through torture. That's different, but I don't think that'd be what he'd be doing. He's probably, senile, whatever. The point is, in this hypothetical scenario, I would be like, no, Pope shouldn't do that. That's actually really bad. The Pope did that. They'd be like, well, you have to understand that it's just imprudent. And the Second Vatican Council says blah, 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 surprises of the Holy Spirit. And it comes off as a very smarmy and irrational way of thinking, because basically to think that the Pope could never be wrong, or that even, and this is the thing about Second Vatican Council, there's no anathemas attached to it. There are so many questions about that. I mean, is it Gaudium et Spes that says modern man is becoming more aware of the dignity of the person? I think that's what it opens up with, or something like that. That can't be a teaching of the church. Like, that's something that it is impossible that would be binding on the faithful, because it's not a matter of faith and morals. It's a sociological statement about temporary affairs. And even then, it was written in the 1960s. So I could say, even if that was true for that week that it was written, it's not true now, I can't believe that. I cannot say that I have to believe everything in the Second Vatican Council, because I would have to suspend my understanding of church teaching, and I'd have to suspend my reason. I look around and I see abortion and this and this and this. It's like, no, we're not having a better idea of the dignity of a human person. I don't know what the golden age would be, but let's just pick one for the sake of a conversation. Let's just say pre-World War II. So no, massive casualties in World War II. Let's just say pre-World War I. So World War I was a terrible mechanistic war. So none of that, no abortion legally, no euthanasia. That would probably be the best time in human history as far as understanding the dignity of the person, because we did not have mechanized warfare. There was no abortion legally. There was no euthanasia. There was only the welfare of the children, because there was no divorce, to be honest. And then there was enough technological advances that in theory you could have sort of comforts that help you with disease and things like that. Theoretically, the best time in human history is probably like 1913 or something like that. So if the church, maybe they could make a statement like that, but it's just patently false. The 1960s is a time when modern man has realized that the human person has more dignity than he realized before, considering 1973 you have Roe versus Wade. So this does not make any sense. I cannot assent to that, because it is not a teaching of Catholicism. It is merely the opinion of a group of bishops about a sociological phenomenon that they have no special charism in discerning. So, when we consider this in light of the Second Vatican Council, the whole of the documents are muddy with statements like this. We mentioned Vatican I. Vatican I, this is why it's such a tragedy that never finished. Maybe that was the intention of the Freemasons who organized the revolution in Italy that stopped the council. Who knows? Maybe they had foresight like that. But they declared the Pope's infallibility, but did not really declare all of the extents and limits of it. Only that it is a thing, which it is, but not where it always is. And there wasn't enough to explain, how we're supposed to understand that in all cases. And then you get to the point where you have the Second Vatican Council, you have all these statements, like I mentioned, with modern man's dignity and so on and so forth. This idea that you could hold that the Pope is, basically they can't really be wrong on something. I have to suspend my reason, which means, ironically, I have to disobey this First Vatican Council, because the First Vatican Council talks about reason as almost a sacred thing, where I can even know the existence of God by it and not Scripture, without using Scripture. So, its inconsistencies abound. And even a man like Cardinal Mueller, who is a super intelligent, very traditionally minded cardinal of the church, especially for our day. He works with LifeSite. He clearly is pretty based, not many clerics are going to work with LifeSite. They should. I wish they would, but they won't, when I was at the March for Life here dinner, the Ottawa one in May, the bishop-elect, his new bishop, the new bishop of Ottawa. The old bishop was nice to LifeSite, Bishop Prendergast. He was actually pretty conservative. He, one Christmas, he actually offered the SSPX his own personal chapel because their chapel was leaking. And they said, we can't use it because it's not set up for the TLM. So we found them a church they could do their Christmas Mass in. That's really nice of them. And it wasn't in some namby-pamby ecumenism way. It was like, oh, now you're Catholic priest, you need a place to do Mass. And when there was this big Satanist Mass conference thing, whatever, in about 2018, I think, Prendergast actually went to it as the bishop outside and said exorcism prayer. So it's pretty good, actually, as far as they go. But the new bishop, not the same way. A little bit more on the liberal side of things. And he was at the dinner, the March for Life dinner, because he has to be there, because he's forced to be pro-life by his job. And LifeSite was there because we're part of we're related to the organization team. And it was really strange because, anyway, there's a rift there. But the video message being played was from Archbishop Vigano. So I just thought it was funny. It's like you've got this liberal bishop and, Bishop Vigano, who's like in hiding, persona non grata or whatever, and it's just, anyway. So Cardinal Mueller, he's very based on a lot of things. He's going to associate himself with LifeSite, but even he falls into this logical merry-go-round of the Second Vatican Council. It's almost inescapable.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because I put out basically that Vatican II. You have these nonsense statements in Lumen Gentium and Gaudium et Spes, like you referenced, and what the unfortunate thing that a guy like Mueller ends up falling into is what you see the leftists falling into when they say something. Well, real Marxism has never been tried. It's real communism has never been tried. It's like this real Vatican II has never been tried. Real Lumen Gentium has never been tried, and it's like, no, in fact it has, and we just keep experimenting with it and keep experimenting with it. The conservatives often mean well by it and think that, well, if we just implement the letter more, that might be, if we just stick to the letter of Vatican II, we'll be better off. But the ones in charge who say, no, we need to continue to implement the council know that it's destructive. So what folks like Mueller and guys like him need to see, and guys like Cardinal Burke, that it's, they need to draw the conclusion that, guys like Lefebvre drew, and that it does have to do with the content of the Second Vatican Council, and not accidents of the Second Vatican Council. And I actually, so I hate to comment on the debate again, but I'm going to. Even Jeff Kastman, who attends the society, from what I understand, I think he does, said that regarding things in Vatican II, ambiguities need to be interpreted in a hermeneutic of continuity. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like an SSPX guy or a trad. With all due respect, I could dig into my I have the quote somewhere, but that's actually patently false. A former pope prior to this, the Second Vatican Council, said when there's an ambiguity in a document, if something's unclear and it can be interpreted as either heretical or traditional, you are to interpret it as heretical and get rid of it.
Yeah, well, okay, so let's comment on that for a second here, because we're going to bring up Nostra Aetate. We've got about 10 minutes left. We'll bring up this final example here from Vatican II. This is where we use our reason, ladies and gentlemen. So Joe Boca is a person with an intellect and a will, okay? So because I deserve, he is owed Christian charity, fraternal charity by me, his brother in Christ. I interpret his actions with the benefit of the doubt. That's how I act towards persons. So if someone says to me, I think Joe is cheating on his wife, and I say, that doesn't sound like Joe, doesn't have a wife. But if he did,
I was going to say, well, first and foremost, yeah.
It's like, I couldn't have done, I'm not married. No, but I would say, you know what? I'm not going to believe this. I'm going to go find out if this is the case. And I'm going to go with benefit of the doubt for Joe, because he's owed that as at a Christian charity. Because what's more dangerous, this is the reality in this case. It's all a matter of prudence. What's more dangerous is that it's more dangerous that a false accusation is spread than even a true statement comes out. And here's why. If it's true, there's no real danger in it. It's like, this is just something that happened, and now we deal with it accordingly, and it's cut and dry. If it's false, your reputation is ruined, and for no reason. There's a type of injustice done. It's not an injustice for you to be outed as an actual criminal if you are. It is an injustice for you to be outed as a criminal when you're not, if that makes sense. That's what it's a matter of justice, applying the virtue of prudence in order to find what is just. When it comes to doctrine, the point of doctrine is so that you know the faith, because if you willingly adhere to something false, you are in danger of dying, in an imperfect state and not being saved. So the point of doctrine for the justice of the souls who receive it is for your faith to be edified. If it's possible, even if it's just it's slightly possible, like prudentially speaking, it's a 10%, 15% that's going to lead you astray. Even if that's the case, as you said, prudentially, it makes sense to avoid that teaching because you gain nothing by it. There is only injustice befalls you in this case, an injustice against your soul, and an injustice against God ultimately, because he's owed the right worship, right doctrine, so on and so forth. So this is why the SSPX has always had a prudential understanding of the Second Vatican Council. It is possible. We'll get to, and we'll look at Nostra Aetate here real quick, because this is a perfect example. If people don't know, Nostra Aetate is the document on other world religions, okay? and this is example, just the title here, okay? Just the fact that this title, look at this title, everybody, Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian Religions. That's not, this document can't even really be a teaching document, because it's a declaration on the relation of the church to non-Christian religions. Great. The church has relations with other religions. I don't have to believe any of that to be saved. I may as well say, here's a document. We know all other religions are false. That's de fide. The gods that, like that's not, we cannot deny that. They do obviously contain natural truths. Of course they do. But we have to believe they're false. Otherwise, Catholicism is not the only true religion. And then outside of the church, there's no salvation is a completely meaningless concept. So this is where the confusion lies again. Just the fact that this is called Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian Religions, this cannot even really be a teaching document other than almost political, sociological. So one of the things that always struck me, and I'll find the what would you do without Control F, say? Buddhism. Okay. There's only one. Okay. Okay, here it is. So Buddhism, in its various forms, realizes the radical insufficiency of this changeable world. Fair enough. It teaches a way by which men in a devout and confident spirit may be able to either acquire the state of perfect liberation or attain by their own efforts or through higher help, supreme illumination. Okay, it teaches that, but that's false. Okay, perfect liberation. They can't achieve perfect liberation because they don't have the Holy Spirit. That's number one. Likewise, other religions found everywhere try to counter the restlessness of the human heart, each in its own manner, by proposing ways comprising teachings, rules of life, and sacred rites. The Catholic Church rejects nothing that is true and wholly indiffering. In these religions, she regards with sincere reverence those ways of conduct in life, those precepts and teachings which, though differing in many aspects from the ones she holds and sets forth, nonetheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men. Indeed, she proclaims and ever must proclaim Christ, the way, the truth, and the life, in whom men may find the fullness of religious life. Okay, this is why this is a very dangerous document. I can't say this document is heretical, but I can't say that it doesn't suggest heresy. Does that make sense? Because I'm saying, here it is saying, Buddhism teaches a way by which men in a devout and confident spirit may attain or acquire a state of perfect liberation. Why is that dangerous? It's dangerous because you need to say that that's false. Prudentially speaking, if I and I know this, if I show this to a 10-year or a 15-year-old kid who is religiously confused, well, the church says that Buddhism teaches that you can obtain a state of perfect liberation. Now, you could say, well, the church doesn't teach that, because of course, by the letter of the law, that document is saying that Buddhism teaches it, not Catholicism. But the document's not saying that it's false. And this is the prudential danger in this document. It sniffs of heresy. And even if it does sniff of heresy, then it presents a danger. What say you?
Well, sort of back to what the idea that it is to be interpreted as such. Yeah. Like if it's possible to say it's heresy, it is heresy. It seems like.
Right.
And that's one of the genuine questions that I think people ask is that, well, okay, if the post-conciliar church, which says that I could go attend a non-Christian, a non-Catholic service, then I could do it. People seem to have interpreted it that way, and well, okay. So you have the unfortunate combination of, well, you start to read Nostra Aetate, and then all of a sudden you poke your head up in 1986, and then there's John Paul II standing with a bunch of pagans, and then you say to yourself, "Oh, that is what they meant."
Yeah.
So, as it says in Shakespeare, "Confusion hath made its masterpiece."
Well, and I would say again that Vatican II respecter. I respect Vatican II. I respect the 95% of the Second Vatican Council that seems to be a repetition of church teaching. That 5% makes me really nervous because, like I said, I don't want people thinking that you can get perfect liberation from Buddhism, because that's not true. But we could say the Pope in the past has been around pagans. The great saints have been around pagans. Sure, St. Boniface went around some pagans and cut down their sacred oaks. Yes, if the Pope was out there saying, I'm going to invite all of the leaders of the world's religions to come to Rome to pray, and then proceeded to hand them all a rosary and said, we're going to pray this, I'd be like, that's one of the most base things any Pope's ever done in history. He's making the world leaders pray the rosary. So they're either going to leave and show that they have no belief in the faith and, let them be anathema, or they might actually, I'm just making up a hypothetical thing here. Like, that'd be great. I'd love that, or even if he just preached to them and said, we're here because I want you to know that the true way to world peace is the way, the truth, and the life. And here is what Jesus said, and here is his teachings. Here's your little Gideon Bible. Everyone read this. Here's a letter I wrote about, how you can become Catholic. Basically, I'm imagining some sort of papal RCIA class. So yeah, if you want to do that. But if he comes and says, we're all going to pray to our gods in our own way, the gods of the nations are demons, and that makes me really nervous. So even there, it's an emphasis. It's an emphasis question. See what I mean?
Yeah. And well, okay, what you end up seeing is the manifest. Like I just referenced Sisi, right? You end up seeing the unfortunate manifestation in that way. But then the problem is that people then tell me that I have to interpret Pachamama, for instance, as imprudent and not idolatry. And to which I respond, take a walk. It is idolatry. It's not Our Lady of the Amazon. Pachamama is an idol. Stop. Stop denying what you see right in front of you. It's worse than imprudent, because is it imprudent then that the manifestation of Nostra Aetate ends up being somebody like Bishop Barron telling Ben Shapiro that Catholicism is the privileged path? Is that imprudent, or is it heresy?
Yeah, it's
both.
It's imprudent to spread heresy.
And this is frankly what I'm tired of with these people.
Yeah,
is that anything. They will use the word imprudent, I swear, to get around anything. Well, of course it's imprudent, yeah, but it's much worse than that. Idolatry is not imprudent. It's apostasy.
Yes.
that I'm sorry, that is what it is.
Yeah.
The conclusions you draw from apostasy, maybe they're unfortunate, but it is that. Don't tell me it's don't laugh it off and say, well, it's no big deal. We're in the worst crisis the church has ever been in. I don't want to hear that, there's the Arian crisis and all the churches, most of the churches were in. I don't really care. At least by all appearances, I'm sure those churches would have had an ostensible Catholicity to them, which we do not have now.
Oh, I wish we had Arianism today instead of what we have, because it's like we could actually argue about something. Is Christ God or not? Let's actually just work on that. Not well, what does it mean to be God? you know, like no, let's not have this well, it depends on whether or not we take all of the scriptures as being literal or as being metaphorical or as what does it mean to be supernatural and what is the religious sense of man and blah 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 blah. And you get to the point where you can't even argue whether or not Christ is God or not because we can't even get past the first page of the dictionary. But you mentioned, and this will close with this here. I can't find the citation right now, but trust me, ladies and gentlemen, I've read it and I've talked about it many places. In the Catholic Encyclopedia. Oh, I know where it is. It's an Ed Fazer's article from 2018. Let me just bring that up here because I want people to see this. 2018 death penalty. Yes. Okay. Because and he's a JP2 respecter. So this is not like, he's a great scholar, but this isn't like some super rad trad, whatever. Seemed to indicate. Okay, good. So I'll share this on screen here because this goes about historically how the church has understood how we're, even with the Pope, how we interpret certain things that could sniff of heresy. Okay. And here's the last, there it is. Boom. Okay. We got it. See it? Okay. So it is important then for Catholics to realize that the traditional teaching of the church has always allowed for the possibility of a criticism of a pope who teaches error. Indeed, such an acknowledgement is there in the New Testament in St. Paul's famous rebuke of St. Peter for conduct that, and here's the money quote, okay? Here is the money quote. Seemed to indicate a wish to seemed to indicate a wish. So it seemed to indicate a desire. It's not even concrete, but it seemed to indicate a wish to compel the pagan converts to become Jews and accept circumcision and the Jewish law. And this is from the encyclopedia. Okay, it's in this citation. All right. So let's just go over that one more time for all the students in the back who didn't hear me, who were falling asleep after lunch. Seemed to indicate a wish. This is so this is what I saw this, it was striking to me. That is so subjective. Seemed to indicate a desire is what it's saying. So it seemed to me that Joe was thinking about doing something maybe. In this Catholic Encyclopedia, the old one, the good one, it's citing why it's okay for the Pope to be criticized by a bishop, of course. And Thomas Aquinas talks about in extreme cases, lay people as well. Just on the fact that what Peter did by sitting down and eating in the kosher ways, whatever he was doing with these guys, to get them into the church, that alone, just the appearance, seemed to indicate a desire to compel them to do something heretical. My goodness gracious. What the heck is Assisi? Not to go on about it, but what is Pachamama? Like, I wish Pope Francis just sat down and ate with the shamans and mentioned and a transcript came out him saying, it seems to me that there is a similarity between shamanism and Christianity. That'd be like the lowest level of scandal compared to what happened. You see what I'm saying? Like, people have lost this sense. And honestly, I really think it comes down, it's all emphasis. It comes down to a lack of urgency about the salvation of your soul. If you think that, as Bishop Barron has said, the various rays of the various lesser lights of other religions and so forth, if you think that that's enough or that that's sufficient or that it's, almost good enough, if you think that, then you have no urgency for the salvation of souls. You don't believe in a practical sense, I don't think you believe in hell. I don't think you believe people go there. And I don't think you understand how easy it is for that to happen, which is what the church has always understood. So we're looking at old teachings here that were understood for centuries, that it was bad enough that St. Peter seemed to wish, it appeared that he seemed to wish that they became Jews before they became Christians. That is how we're supposed to understand church teaching. So if we have documents that seem to indicate that Buddhists can attain a state of perfection, then how is it any different? Closing thoughts for you.
It's not any different, and it's just worse. That's the only way. That's the only way in which it's different, right? Coupled with the fact now that we have a much worse situation with Francis than we do. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think JP2 was just as bad as Francis. That's one of my more unpopular opinions, but whatever.
It set it all in motion. It set it all in motion. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, look, perhaps we'll do a full show on this one day, but I mean, the bishops, which none of us like, and even a lot of the secularists didn't like because they were responsible for a lot of what we've seen with the sex abuse crisis.
Yeah,
those were John Paul II's bishops.
Yeah,
and hard to believe that he wouldn't have known, given the sheer number of them.
Yeah.
But at any rate, we have the more in our face problem with Francis because of Amoris Laetitia. And like you said, well, I don't, do they not believe in hell? I doubt they do, because
at least practically speaking.
Yeah, practically at least, but theoretically probably too, because they're all big into von Balthasar, right? Yeah. So I mean, John Paul II was going to make von Balthasar a cardinal, and then he died. Yeah. We know Bishop Barron, for instance, is a big fan. So the whole reasonable hope all men are saved garbage. And that's the modus operandi with which these people are teaching. And what do we? You saw the I forget, what was it? It wasn't Nostra. I think it was Gaudium et Spes, right? With the idea of man becoming more conscious of his dignity, which is a stupid word you hear all the time. Well, so there's a sociological. It seems sociological, right? But I actually think there's a religious undertone to that because of Teilhard de Chardin.
I was going to say, it's this.
It's very Teilhardian in the sense that it's like, well, we as man, we're getting to the point where we're so conscious of our dignity to the point where it's like, well, are we to where we all meld into this the singularity, of becoming gods, and the ultimate forgiveness and of everybody, and the Omega point and all this stuff. So no, I mean, these people don't. I mean, and again, it does is Gaudium et Spes saying that specifically? No,
but it's suggested.
But it's it's not unfair to interpret it in those terms, because these were the influencers on those who were writing the documents.
Yep, you're right. You're right. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, we solved all the world's problems, as we do every time we chat. And
we did it again.
We did it again. We're going to do an episode next week, on divine mercy, because we like having reasons for people to fight in our comment section. So I'm going to I'll take a sort of agnostic, kind of classic traditional Catholic position where I'm kind of not into it, and here are the reasons why. And Joe's going to present information which I think I haven't seen it yet, but he says it's pretty sound as to why these questions have been dealt with, and then we'll let you decide for yourself, because you're big boys and girls, and you have intellects and a will, and you can do that. So stay tuned for that. And I think that's about it. Like this channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Links in the description, etc., etc., etc. Follow Joe on Twitter.
Leave a comment. Commenting is good. Yeah, that helps the algorithm.
It does. What are you at right now? A couple thousand followers? Where you at?
I'm almost at 2,000.
All right, get him to 2,000 by following.
Yeah, get me to 2,000. Come on.
Yeah, he gets it's a little boost if you get to 2,000. I don't know. I'm just making that up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless.